This is a Niche Radio podcast. Subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or log into www.nicheradio.co.za.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to SuperDads, the show that takes you through the stories and journeys of myself and other SuperDads out there. Your expecting dads, your dads to be, and the ones who are planning to be dads. And my site, Lech.co.za, focuses on optimal environmental health. And today we have a very special guest. He, in my view, is sort of one of those super dads because he's made some remarkable, groundbreaking precedences for South Africa particularly. His name is Karl, and he's in the 60s now. And he is coming to us live from the Kingdom of Eswatini. And I might be a bit incorrect on the pronunciation, but like colloquially that is called Swaziland. And he is his background, and his background is physics and mathematics. He's was a physics professor at University of Witwatersrand, and lately now he's back in Swaziland. Just so that you guys understand. And he is currently a sub-editor and freelance writer or freelance scientific editor, specializing in statistical and econometric papers. And what is key with him is that when I say precedent, back in his days when he was teaching, this was 15 years ago, more so, and there was a ruling set by the Advertising Standards Authority of South Africa. And this ruling was set in 2004, although Karl did start the process beforehand through his nominated complaint. And what a nutshell it comes down to is that the Advertising Standards Authority ruled based on Karl's presentation of evidence is that children under the age of 16 cannot be advertised cellular or wireless communication devices for non-essential purposes. And what they ruled is, I'm going to read you out the statement here, is that in terms of the precautionary principle, it is recommended that SACTA, this was the original cellular body task force, directs all its members that advertisements that go further than promoting the use of cellular telephones for essential purposes should not be directed at children under the age of 16. This should be done through the selection of media, style of presentation, context or content, in which the advertisements appear. In other words, advertisements targeting children should not encourage the use of cellular telephones other than for essential purposes. Such approach would be in line with that of the UK self-regulatory system. Now, as I said, this was over a decade and a half ago, and our environments have changed quite a bit, and the risks are higher, more ambient, non-native electromagnetic fields. And what I found key with this case is that what made it sort of successful is that Karl himself is a teacher. He's born and bred as that. And he was only able to be successful because he has, vast knowledge and understanding of the physics and the science and even the biophysics of it, and was able to communicate in a way of how other person on the other side of the table could understand it. Because an ordinary person, normally, if they were to lodge a complaint, would get blindsided or try to be steamrolled. And that's why this was such an important case ruling that Karl managed, because he created a structure that they were then able to follow that enabled an easier mechanism for the public to launch complaints. And now with ASA becoming part of the Consumer Protection Act, this would carry through. However, South Africa, it does fall on this system where it's a reactive system, meaning that even if regulatory bodies be it NGO or government, notices a complaint, they can't take action unless a complaint is actually made. And that's, I was hoping Karl could take us more through the history and his explanation of non-native EMFs, along with some of the interesting projects he's been spurring now in Swaziland. And I've got my puppy who's now barking in the background. Very interesting because she's clearly bored. But let's hope that noise doesn't disturb us too much. Karl's telling me he's also got his dogs in the background and they might bark up, but not to worry. And Karl is coming to us from the ASL line. And so the sound might be a bit dodgy, but we're going to take these gaps to try and rectify how we can and repeat if there are any issues. So Karl, please welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, James. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, good. If my dogs hear your dogs, there's going to be trouble. So I'll keep the volume down here. Thank you very much for that. To my knowledge, that Advertising Standards of Authority of South Africa ruling to this date is the only warning of any kind given by any authority of any stripe in South Africa that there might be any problem with cell phones in children or cell phones in health. There are no health regulations at all in place in South Africa to protect the public. The health regulations with regard to that kind of radiation were withdrawn in 2003. They've never been replaced. Actually, 2002, they were withdrawn. So there's no regulations, no warning, no idea from anyone that there might be danger. I might be wrong, but as far as I know, the only warning given by anybody was this Advertising Standards of Authority warning. So it really was actually a bit of a landmark. What convinced them, what actually made them take up the precautionary principle was the fact that the British Advertising Standards Authority had done this. There was something called the Stewart Commission in the UK, a government commission that looked at radiation. They recommended in 2000 that there should be no non-essential use by kids under 16, and that's what the Advertising Standards Authority picked up on. They said, "What the British are doing that, we'll follow suit."
I think
Since then, as you say, though, it's a reactive thing. You have to see an advert involving a kid, and then you've got to complain. It's purely dependent on the public. I'm not in South Africa anymore, so I don't see, but people tell me that they still see adverts clearly targeting children or using children.
No, and you're correct. And I think also going back to your ruling is you were able to when I interviewed them from in my research 2 years ago. They said a key thing as well was the evidence you presented was able to show how the radiation or the non-native EMF was able to bring about abnormal brain function or affect the brain functioning of the child. And that was a key element. And I was hoping you can maybe sort of raise or highlight you being a physicist in training, what sort of papers you explained or how that's updated now, has it changed or not, and what your advice regarding that is.
The big thing at that stage was results by Leonard Hardle in Sweden in around about 2000. No, hang on, I'm muddling him up. It was Leif Salford at Lund University in Sweden. Sorry, I'm muddling him up. Leif Salford in 2000 took rats and he exposed them to ordinary cell phone radiation for 2 hours. 2 hours of radiation, nothing more. And he found there was tremendous damage to the brain. What was happening was that the blood-brain barrier, which protects the brain from toxins, was being compromised, and the brains of these rats were being flooded with toxins and was damaging the brain. It was actually causing lesions in the brain. And in 2000, he gave a warning. He said, "We're going to see adolescents with dementia. We're going to see young people showing severe brain damage very soon." And I mean, those pictures of those damaged rat brains, you could see the blood leaking across the blood-brain barrier very clearly. They were quite striking. And I think this is one of the big things. Now there's a lot of evidence that this radiation affects brainwaves. The World Health Organization themselves will tell you, "Oh, there's no problem, there's no proof." I've got a review paper produced by the World Health Organization that lists 26 separate studies that all show that ordinary cell phone radiation changes brainwave patterns. So we know that cell phone radiation changes brainwave patterns. What it especially does is it enhances brainwaves, what's called the low alpha. It's around about 8.
Sorry, Karl, my light was falling off. Carry on.
Okay, so there are many studies now. I mean, I can say literally dozens of studies. At that stage, there were fewer studies. There was a Swiss study that showed changes to brain waves. But these brainwave changes are all happening in what's called, well, not all, but mostly happening in what's called the low alpha range of the brainwave spectrum. Now that is a kind of, as you're falling asleep, as you are falling asleep, your brain enters this low alpha state. It's a semi-zombie state. It's between waking and sleeping. It's where your brain switches from external attention to internal attention. Now, I was seeing, and a lot of teachers are now seeing ADD, attention deficit disorder, and you are seeing kids who have a lot of trouble in negotiating between the inside and the outside world. It will happen over and over again, and I guarantee every single teacher you find now will tell you this. A child will put their hand up and want to ask you a question. And when you turn to the kid and say, yes, what do you want? They will say, oh, I can't remember what I was going to ask you. Their external attention is getting you, the teacher, is muddled with their internal attention, and they can't make that switch anymore. And getting your attention means they've forgotten what they were going to ask you. This happened over and over and over again. It's actually what drove me out of teaching. I thought I actually can't deal with this. I did a master's degree in the language of the classroom. In 1987, I finished it. And I especially studied attention in the classroom. I'm the only person that has really developed a good instrument for measuring attention in the classroom. You can look at what the kids are saying or what the teacher's saying, but the point is, are the kids paying attention? So I look very hard at attention. I can say that I'm actually an expert on attention in the classroom. And there's been a massive change in kids' ability to pay attention, how they're paying attention, their ability to actually remember what they're going to ask you. This is now across the board. I can say honestly that in 15 years of working in Black education in South Africa, working with thousands of students, I did not see one single case of anything like attention deficit disorder in any single Black student ever until 1994. In 1994, I was teaching at a Black school in Johannesburg. And towards the end of the year, it just seemed that there was massive, rampant ADD breakdown. The kids were fighting, they were punching each other. That's why I got out of the school. That's why I actually got out of teaching. I didn't understand what was going on. Now I know that was exactly when cell phones were switched on for the first time, towards the end of 1994. And I am 100% certain that that syndrome, this whole ADD syndrome, is very, very closely linked to cell phones. Anyway, at that stage, in 2004, so not all this information was available. The strongest thing was this blood-brain barrier damage and this prediction that we're going to see with this teenage dementia. And we are now seeing it. In Japan, in Korea, there are something like 3% of kids, 3%. This is in many studies. I edit these statistical studies, so I've seen them. Where 3% of the kids are withdrawn, they stay at home, they stay in their bedrooms, they cannot interact or function with the outside world at all. It's actually a national crisis. And they've now said in places like Taiwan, your parents can actually be charged with a crime if they let their children use their mobile devices too much. They've realized that there's a big problem. We're getting into it here. Anyway, I'll tell you one last thing from the Advertising Standards Authority. At the very, very first committee meeting we had, there were a couple of teachers there. I said to them, are any of you teachers? And a couple of them said, yes, we have been teachers. I said to them, well, you will know then that the most important thing in the classroom is attention. If the kids are not paying attention, you don't have a lesson. So this thing of attention deficit disorder is a crisis in the classroom. Then I told them I was always a very big anti-smoker. I always used to go and fight with people in the staff room. You know, in those days, staff rooms were full of blue smoke. And I was very unpopular in the staff room because I used to stop the teachers from smoking. I was very, very, very anti-smoking. I told these ASA people, you know, I'm a real lifelong anti-smoker. I would far rather see a 14-year-old smoking a cigarette than a 14-year-old using a mobile phone. Because I know that that mobile phone is damaging that child's brain. I said, if you're smoking a cigarette, you know, people with Alzheimer's, they found that you put a nicotine patch on them, it wakes them up a bit. It doesn't actually damage your brain, it might damage your lungs a bit. But as far as I'm concerned, knowing that your children are damaging their brains using a phone is far worse than smoking a cigarette. And I think that they looked at me in shock and they saw that I was deadly serious. And I have a funny feeling that may have influenced a couple of them that I meant business.
No, I mean, you're absolutely correct with that. I mean, with the studies with the blood-brain barrier, they injected methylene blue into the system, and then they were able to show you that dye, how it was able to cross the blood-brain barrier. And there also was a study done in KwaZulu-Natal University, I think in 2006, 2007, where the conclusion was that it caused abnormal brain functioning as well, where the mice were having these erratic fits and fidgets and scratching and not able to complete the maze correctly and such like. And with
there have been many studies like that. There was a recent study at Yale University where this Yale researchers said, quote, these radiated rats, they'd been radiated in the womb. He said they were bouncing off the walls. They were hyperactive. He said they were very, very noticeably different. Anyway, there's many studies showing that. Carry on.
Yeah, so what I found also in this research is that literature tends to discriminate between the different types of non-native EMF. So they'll discriminate between low frequency and high frequency, and then also blue light, and all of them are non-native. And, these mobile devices, tablets, computers, in today's world have all three. They have a high magnetic field emitting off of them, the high microwave field, and also the blue light, which alters the brain chemistry through manipulating the clock in the eye. And that would affect the dopamine levels.
Also, they have magnetic fields. If you've got a mobile phone, it's got a battery in. Okay, and if that battery produces a direct current, as long as that battery is stable, you get a stable magnetic field. That's not dangerous. The moment the battery starts fluctuating, you get a fluctuating magnetic field. Those are known. It's listed as a possible carcinogen. So you have these very, very strong magnetic fields. There are some researchers, there's a guy called Alistair Phillips at PowerWatch in the UK, who has said that those strong fluctuating magnetic fields, no one thinks about them. He says they may be some of the most dangerous things. They've found that fluctuating magnetic fields very, very, very strongly affect the brain. You can cause all kinds of brain effects in people if you know how to change the magnetic fields on a person's brain. So you're right, it's microwaves, it's at every level these things are knocking us.
And yes, you're correct. The multiple magnetic fields, the magnetic flux density, the higher it is and more erratic, the harder it is. And this you can see its effects also on people with EEG, EKGs, where you're looking at the alpha wave. And if it's very docile and calm, then we able to show this correlation that a person is being affected by the non-native EMFs. Where it's in the human body, it's meant to actually be very erratic and very complex in these patterns. So like I said, you mentioned the blood-brain barriers, also the gut barrier as well that's affected through studies. Interesting how you mentioned of being able to do mind manipulation. There's famous scientist, Dr. Andrew Marino. He's also one of the, he worked with Dr. Becker back in the day, where they had to put probes in animals and they would manipulate their ability of thinking using the probes. And then that evolved onto, okay, if we can do it via probe, why can't we also do it via magnetic or wireless signals? So that's where that evolved further with that. But what's key is also these things is that, the effects from the radiation is it's infecting our environment. And we know epigenetics sort of, disproved Darwin's thing that everything is genetic. It's the environment that's going to affect how our bodies respond. And sort of being you in your location, you're in an optimal environment with high altitude, great sun. The water is amazing with its depleted deuterium levels from the mountain. So from a health regeneration point, intuitively, you went to an environment that was able to work for you. I mean, they have the famous guy named Wim Hof with the Iceman, the Wim Hof method. And this guy does techniques that it manipulates his mitochondria function. Even though he's a vegan and a heavy smoker, picking up from that, he's able to deal with those kind of things like the smoking. It has a big impact, but his body is working at amazing condition and being able to perform and handle these kind of environments. But had he been in an environment with very high, non-native EMFs, he would quickly struggle. So it's these things that we try to do, and what we're finding with these mitigation options is that with the impending 5G coming on board, the type of mito hacks or ability to implement these mitigation options are a lot more challenging and difficult. I mean, that's why mitochondrial medicine is only a couple of years old. But we find even with Paul Hero's work, where it takes a very small magnetic field, just down to 10 nanoteslas, to disrupt the predictability of free electrons in tunneling in the ATPS process.
Okay, I don't know about that, but this mitochondrial issue is a very, very important one. There's a warning has been given out by Mr. Barry Trower, who I'm sure you've heard of. Mr. Yes. Barry Trower was the British government's top scientist working in the field of microwave warfare in the 1960s, and he's a particular expert on the effects on physiology, of human physiology, of radiation. And he came to South Africa in 2010. We traveled with him for a week. I thought he was going to be a radio expert. To my surprise, he's much, much more expert on human physiology. And he really knows an awful lot about how this radiation affects the body. He has put out a warning that I actually regard as the single most serious warning ever put out to the human race, ever. He's saying this radiation, if you're in a Wi-Fi environment, if you've got a woman who's pregnant in a Wi-Fi environment, and she's pregnant with a female fetus in her womb, the eggs of that female fetus, if that baby is going to grow up to be a mother, her eggs develop while she is still a fetus in the womb. And according to Mr. Trower, the ovarian follicles are very, very sensitive to this radiation. They don't have any protection against it, and they are very, very likely to be damaged. That means that a baby girl who is in the womb, who is being radiated, is born with a damaged egg line. Her eggs are damaged. When she grows up and has children herself, there's a very, very high chance, he says, that those children are going to have birth deformities. He says basically, the woman now who's in a Wi-Fi environment, her granddaughter is going to be born deformed. Her daughter developing in her womb is developing deformed or damaged eggs. Now this is, he says, damage to the mitochondrial DNA. If people don't know about this, there's two kinds of DNA in your cell. There's DNA in the nucleus of the cell, which is what exactly reproduces the body and so on. And then in the body of the cell, you've got DNA, which is passed down through the cell line of the female line, from mother to daughter, from mother to daughter. It's not inherited, it's actually inherited in the cell material. If there's any DNA damage to that mitochondrial DNA, it can never be repaired. It will remain in that female line for the rest of the history of that family. As long as there are female humans being born, that genetic damage will be carried in the mitochondrial DNA. So he's warning that this mitochondrial DNA damage represents permanent genetic damage being done to the human race. And he's saying now that any woman who is pregnant and in a Wi-Fi field, in a microwave field, is at very, very great risk of having her grandchildren genetically compromised, and this genetic damage can never be undone. It will remain with the human race for the whole of its future. Now, this damage is being done right around us right now. They are putting Wi-Fi in schools. Mr. Charles said anyone who puts a Wi-Fi in a school, he said, should be locked up in jail for life. And he means what he's saying, that they are threatening the lives and futures of thousands, millions of children. He says, for the cost of putting in a few wires. So this issue of mitochondrial DNA is a very, very, very serious one. And also, I'm interested, this is a program for dads. There are many, many, many studies now. There's one review study from Australia which shows 21 studies. This is just one review. 21 studies showing damage to human sperm from radiation. This is from cell phone radiation. Now, if a gentleman puts a cell phone in his pocket, there is virtually no distance at all from that phone to his genetic material. Okay? Now, they tell you, keep your phone, if you look in the fine print of your phone, your iPhone, whatever, it says, keep your phone 0.36 inches away from your head. There's been a warning given by one of the top scientists in the world. His name's Darius Lezinski, who's a former head researcher of the Finnish government Radiation Protection Bureau, and he's one of the top scientists in the world. He has gone public to say, if you put your phone in your pocket, you're going to radiate your testicles, if you're a gentleman, above the FCC limits. Okay? You must not put your cell phone in your pocket. No one is telling people this. They're actually telling you in the fine print, don't put it against your head, but they don't want you not to put it in your pocket. Now, we are seeing autism rising in children, and there's fascinating evidence I'm trying to pin down, which shows that now autism is rising with the age of the father. In the old days, they used to worry about women and their biological clocks. If women were getting over the age of 40, now the clock is ticking. Very much now this is the case, they're saying, for men. Now, why suddenly is there being damage done to sperm? Why are sperm counts plummeting all over the world? They're down 30, 40% around the world. There's something very, very strange happening to the genetics of the human race. And we know for a fact in dozens of studies that this radiation damages human sperm. Yet no one will tell you, don't put your cell phone in your pocket. I was once asked, I gave this warning, and somebody said, can I keep my cell phone in my pocket? I said, keep your cell phone in your pocket as long as you keep the battery in your other pocket. That phone must be off. Now, these warnings are not being given, and yet the science is very well established.
Adding on to the mitochondria, as you're saying, it's not what we see in the studies that the mitochondria dictates the passing on of its states to both male or female children. So the passage of lineage comes from the mother, and the damage of that mitochondria actually starts before she is pregnant. And then, as you say, once she's pregnant, it's going to continue even further. And I don't know if you came into this with your background, but I would see the papers that always go on about, it's about, it penetrates the child further because their cells aren't as well developed, or the skull's not as thick, etc. But I found it actually comes down more to the biophysics and how it interacts with the body's own frequency. And when we're looking at, if we're sticking on the SAR model, that children under the height of 1.3 meters, their whole body SAR absorption is up to 40 times more than the reference level set for an adult. And this is in the 1 to 4 gigahertz range. And when it's inside the mother's womb, it's actually even amplified even further with the magnetic flux density. So all these things, everyone thinks, they get misconceived that if it's more radiation, it's going to do more damage. And yes, we have the issue of the inverse square law. However, you only need 10 nanoteslas to start disrupting the mitochondria, and 50 nanoteslas to easily see it. I mean, this you can see on a microscope. You can see the changes to the mitochondrial function, and it's programming the DNA. So to have such a small amount, 10 or 50 nanoteslas, that's easily identifiable in wireless carrier. But I wanted if you could also elaborate further. All right, I'll come back to it. And the thing is also, like you said, Barry focuses more on this, he's a biology and biophysics. And the issue with engineering physics is that, these engineers typically get to think it's like a switch. If there's a problem, we flick the switch off, no more problem, and we'll just, redesign it and put it back on again. But as you said with these studies, is that the damage is permanent and it continues on to the next generation. And because epigenetic, yes, there's ways one can, regenerate it to a certain degree, but damage is damage, which makes it difficult in that point. And now I forgot what my previous question was on that.
Can I just add something?
Please do.
As far as levels go, high and low levels, industry often looks at studies done with a high level that seem to show no damage. They say, look, it's a very high level. It's thousands of times higher than the levels we use, and there's no damage, therefore there's no problem. What they're finding out more and more, and it's becoming very, very clear, is that certain kinds of damage only happen with very low-level radiation. If the radiation levels get higher, the body has all kinds of protective mechanisms that then kick in. The most interesting study that I know was done at the Weizmann Institute in Israel by Dr. Joseph Friedman, produced a study in 2007. He showed that 2 minutes of ordinary cell phone radiation, GSM cell phone, same as cell phones you use, 2 minutes of radiation causes living human cells to be flooded with free radicals. That is what they call oxidative stress. Now, this affects DNA repair, it affects metabolism, it affects all kinds of things. It can cause very severe neurological damage, etc. But one of the things he found, if you radiate these cells for 20 minutes, you get fewer free radicals produced. The oxidative stress is reduced with a longer exposure because the body's the cell's protective mechanisms kick in. You have things called heat shock proteins, which actually protect the cell. So the cell is now protecting itself. And if you radiate at high levels, you do an experiment at high levels, immediately the body's protective mechanisms kick in. Now, the fact is, those protective mechanisms take energy. The cell is having to work to protect itself. So if that happens for a long while, you're going to feel chronic fatigue, you're going to feel exhausted because your body's busy defending itself. But nonetheless, the body is aware that it's under attack and it is defending itself. These very, very, very low-level things, the body's not aware. It literally kind of comes in under the radar. You talk about non-native EMFs. This is kind of radiation that we've never experienced in all of our human evolution. The body has no idea what it is. However, some of these radiations are pulsed at biologically active frequencies. This is why the brainwaves pick up the low alpha, the 8 hertz frequency is a very strong frequency in GSM radiation. That's what your cell phone pulses at. If you listen to the signal, you hear it pulsing. That's a brainwave frequency. So you get these very low-level signals which tune into biological frequencies, and the body responds. Now it interprets this as a biological signal, and there's no overriding big signal saying, hey, this is damage. Like the body is adapted, for instance, to deal with lightning. It's a natural thing. It's intermittent. You have big lightning bursts at the radiation, actually. It's electromagnetic radiation. It affects the body. And the body's got mechanisms to deal with it. It produces heat shock proteins and things to deal with it. But then the thunderstorm goes away. This radiation, if you're living near a tower, is 24/7, low level, under the radar of your body, constantly agitating biological processes. And this, I'm convinced, is the worst damage is done through low-level, constant radiation or persistent radiation. And I'll tell you something funny. There have not been that many studies done on health around cell phone masts. To the best of my knowledge, I've tried to collect all the studies around the world. I've collected about 24, 25. Every single one of those studies shows some kind of health problem. Actually, a very consistent pattern of health problems: headaches, nausea, dizziness, giddiness, stomach upsets, attention problems, memory problems, skin disorders. Over and over, it's been found in France, in Spain, in Italy. Sorry, not Italy, in Germany, in Israel, increased cancer rates. So all the studies around masks, and masks are supposed to be low level. Yet every single study around a mask has shown problems. The studies with handsets, and you think you're holding a handset against you, you're blasting your, you would think they were much clearer. They're very ambiguous. They're much more ambiguous than studies with masks. Now, what this is telling me is that long-term, low-level radiation is actually more dangerous than short-term intermittent radiation. Our bodies are adapted from exposure to things like lightning. We're used to intermittent, short bursts of radiation, like you get from a cell phone. What we're not adapted for is constant 24/7 irradiation from masks, or if people are in their home and they've got always-on Wi-Fi, they're in a microwave environment, they're sleeping in a microwave environment. I've measured radiation at schools with dormitories where there's a mast in the playground. And I've measured radiation in the classrooms, I've measured it in the dormitories, I've measured it in the playgrounds, in the school hall. If those children are on that campus, they are being radiated literally 24/7 at a low level. That, I'm convinced, is going to prove to be the biggest killer of all.
Oh, it is, and like I said, with the low levels, with the production of free radicals. So the quantum level free radical is the unpairing of the electrons from the protons, and then that results in inflammation and chaos within the cells and mismatching of timing. But I was hoping you could also, we'll come back to the other parts. Is you say cell phones or you say cell tower, but everyone seems to get very confused with the different terminology. Like with the ASA ruling, it says cellular device, and people are honed on that. But maybe you can just, for our listeners out there, clarify for them that is there a difference between a cell phone or Wi-Fi or a smart meter or a cell tower or a cordless phone in a home? Are they different, or are they all the same and have the same capacity to cause these biological functions?
If you were to see all the different frequencies that are passing through your body right as you sit there now, all the different microwave frequencies, there's such a vast proliferation now of this technology. We have what's called LTE, with long-term evolution. This is this new digital television, okay? And it's opened up spaces that they're now using for cell phones that's going up into the gigahertz. We have Wi-Fi going into the gigahertz. We're going to have 5G, which is up into the, I don't even know what range it is now. It's, I know, for instance, these self-driving cars use radars in 70 gigahertz. So you don't know what is radiating out there. You've got a car there that has got something that makes sure you don't bump into the curb, or that is got detects other cars nearby. That car may have a radar that's radiating 77 gigahertz microwaves at a very high level. There's so much radiation. As you say, you've got smart meters, you've got the whole, you've got all the military telecoms. They won't tell you where those masts are. We found those masts in Johannesburg. There are military telecoms. There are all kinds of civilian telecoms. There's satellites which are beaming microwaves down at us. Google have put balloons over Southern Africa that are beaming microwaves down at us. You've got 5G. Unless you know, and you need a very sophisticated meter these days because there's so many different frequencies, even to know what is going on. New technologies are rolled out without any testing, without any warning to the public. I watched in Johannesburg, wave after wave of illness sweep over Johannesburg from one end to the other in a matter of 2 or 3 days. And I would say, right, I know something new has been switched on. What is it this time? And I go looking, and almost always I find it out. I think in round about 2008, there was a particularly vicious flu that went round Johannesburg, a boomerang, like a recurrent flu. It killed many people. Many old people died of it. I got that flu. It was one of the worst flus I ever had. And immediately I said, something new has been rolled out. I took a look. It took me about 5 minutes. This is when Neotel rolled out WiMAX. I was working in Rosebank, Joburg at the time. It's a very highly radiated suburb. And they were now rolling out WiMAX. Suddenly you could get WiMAX, which is like Wi-Fi on steroids, very high power kind of Wi-Fi. And I'm reasonably certain that's what caused that flu epidemic. This is well known. There's a medical doctor in America called Dr. Arthur Furstenberg who tracked in the United States as cell phones were first rolled out, city by city. He found that there would be an epidemic of lingering flu would break out in that city in the same week that they rolled out cell phone networks. In the neighboring city where they hadn't done this yet, there wouldn't be a flu. So you can see these things happening. Olli Johansson in Sweden wrote a very interesting paper. I think it was called 1997, A Very Strange Year for Public Health in Sweden. That was the year that they rolled out cell phones in Sweden. And there was a spike in everything from suicides to road accidents to absenteeism. All sorts of things showed a spike. And then it settles down. You see a spike and then it settles down. Basically, if you've got a chronically ill person in hospital and now you put in a new microwave field, that person may die very quickly. So when they put this new technology on, you see a definite syndrome You see a wave of illnesses, some very vulnerable people die, and then miraculously we kind of adapt to it. We get used to it. We get used to the fact that actually we don't remember things so well. We get used to the fact that we've got headaches. We get used to the fact we don't sleep so well. Oh, it's just life. We get used to the fact that our kids have ADD. Oh, it's just modern life. This is not normal. And I'm saying flatly, and as I said, as an educationist who studied language in the classroom, I'm entitled to say this. The psychology of young people in particular has completely changed over the last 20 years. The psychological makeup of a child in a classroom now, and the psychological makeup of children in classroom, the dynamics of children in classroom, and what teachers have to do in classrooms has completely changed. You can say, oh, it's just modern life, it's this and that. But something is affecting these kids' brains. Something is making them lose focus, lose attention. Something is agitating them to the point where they can hardly sit still. Something is going on. And I guarantee you, you ask any teacher who's been in the classroom for more than 20 years, have you seen a change? They'll all tell you. And I have a friend who's teaching now and is told up front at a college, remember, children these days are all ADD. You've got to have bells and whistles. You've got to keep them they can't concentrate. This is what kids are like these days. There's been a change. And, no one is really tracking this. They're finding this out now in America. There's now, there's a very influential psychologist in America, Dr. Jean Twenge, Twenge. And she, for years, has been tracking psychological changes in children. All this Generation X and Generation Y. She's one of the people who identifies these generations, and she gives them the name. So she's been doing this for years. And she says in 2012, all the psychological markers for young people fell off a cliff. Suicide, depression, all kinds of things. She said something drastic happened. She said, I've been studying mental health statistics of children in the United States from the 1930s. We have never seen a disaster like this, nothing even remotely like this. And she put it down to a very straightforward cause. She said in 2012, 50% of the population now had smartphones. And she said it's the smartphones that are causing this complete disintegration of a whole generation. Her article was called Have Smartphones Destroyed a Generation? Okay, that was in a major US magazine. I think it was Atlantic magazine. This is a major US psychologist, not somebody who spent her life researching children and their psychology and psychological and patterns, saying something drastic, never seen before has happened. Have smartphones destroyed a generation? She's got no doubt what's causing this. And this is now finally gaining attention. I don't know if you saw this. About 3 days ago, the World Health Organization has officially declared computer games to be addictive, or computer gaming addiction is now an official disease. This is the first real sign that the WHO has given that they recognize these devices can be harmful. And it's a big step for them. They wouldn't do this unless there was really overwhelming social damage, evidence that there's social damage. There's really serious damage being done to the whole fabric of society, and especially with young people amongst themselves and their connections with other generations. We've been warning about it. We started with this warning that teenagers would start showing teenage dementia. We are seeing it now. We are seeing kids who are non-functional, who cannot pay attention. Ask any teacher.
No, I mean, that was a very nice explorative description. I mean, you gave a lot of, it's something I'm going to have to re-listen to this recording again and again, because you give so much powerful, impactful information. And then, my mind will be thinking, okay, I've got to ask you a question on this, and then I'll make a note. And then you go to the next one, I'm going to make a note. And then by the time we get to the end, I'm gobsmacked. I'm going, what? But let's see if I can...
Just while you collecting your thoughts there, This is one of the biggest problems with this field. It is so complex. It is so vast. I mean, for instance, I'm a licensed radio ham. I'm a radio operator. I first got my ham radio license in 1975. Okay, so I mean, I've been a radio ham for over 40 years. I've been putting up antennas and dealing with wireless for 40 years now. I first became aware of the dangers of microwaves from reading amateur radio magazines when I was a teenager in the 1970s. I've known microwaves are dangerous. Okay. I've now been researching this flat out for 20 years. And I do not feel I have even scratched the surface. You look every single day, and there is more and more information pouring out. And this is one of the strategies of industry. They overload you, and they overload people, and there's so much research that goes on. They produce contradictory research, they meddle with research, and they produce contradictory, and when I say they produce, I mean I have produced lists of studies that were designed to produce findings and say, oh, look, it's all safe. And I've gone to those researchers and I've challenged them, and they have run away from me. They won't answer my questions because I can see they've rigged these studies. But there's a vast number of studies. Now, one of the very most important phases was when Motorola was, the American manufacturer Motorola Lab was actually leading the implementation of this technology. And they put forward a series of submissions to the FCC, the FDA, basically saying, this has all been documented, look, this is so complicated. It's going to take us years to find out what's happening. Just in terms of radiation, you talk about like a small head and a big head. Do you know how hard it is to model that and model the brain and see how this radiation is working? It's difficult enough, even with ordinary, what they call plane waves, like waves arriving from a distance. If you've got a headphone against your head, it's very complicated, that near field. And they said, look, it's just so complicated. The results are so contradictory. We're not going to find anything. Let's just roll this out and let's just see what happens. And the FCC and the FDA basically said, fine. There was no comprehensive health testing because it's too complicated. And now, we are beginning to see the results. We are experimenting on our children. We are experimenting on ourselves. And there are, I fairly often get attacked by people saying, we just want to know the truth, what's going on. And if anyone really gets on my case and says, what's the truth here? I always tell them, the truth is you are being experimented on and no one knows what the result of this experiment is going to be. The point is, did you give consent to be experimented on? Do you know that you're being experimented on? For instance, they put up microwave masts. They put up cell phone masts in school playgrounds. That's an experiment in microwave radiation on children. Now, do they go and ask the parents of the children, can we carry out a microwave radiation experiment on your children? No. They just put the mast up and they see what happens. In 2006, the World Health Organization, which doesn't conduct any research itself, but sets the research agenda for the world's scientists and researchers. In 2006, the World Health Organization sent a directive that said, do not research health around masks. We do not want research around masks. Especially, do not research cancer around masks. We don't want to see such research. They basically said, listen, masks are at a very low level. There can't be a problem. Don't research this. Now, I already told you, every single study, I think there have been about 5 studies on cancer around masks. Every single one of them has found highly increased cancer rates. There was a Brazilian study that found an excess of, I think it was thousands of cancer mortalities around masks above the baseline that increased as you got closer to the mask. These are thousands of dead bodies, thousands of people who died around cancer, and yet no one will look at this research and they'll say, oh, there's no problem. And then the only thing the World Health Organization will say is, don't do this research. Don't look. We don't want to know. So we're going to do an experiment on your children. We're not going to ask for permission. And especially, we are not going to collect any results of this research. We're going to tell researchers, don't look. If those children are dying, we don't want to know. Now, Barry Trower had been collecting figures of leukemia clusters in schools in Europe with masks. He had got up to 200 clusters. A cluster was more than 10 leukemia mortalities in a single school. So you've got 10 kids in a school dying of leukemia, a school with a mask. He got to over 200 of these clusters, that's 2,000 dead children. And he said, I've had enough. I'm not doing this anymore. And he stopped collecting those figures. It was too depressing for him. Okay, so there is a lot of evidence out there that these masks and this low-level stuff is dangerous, but we're not going to look. So all I'm trying to say to you is, this is a deep, dark, dangerous field. It is, the more you know about it, the more you know how much you don't know. And they trade on this ignorance, and they say, oh, we don't know what happens, therefore let's just radiate and see what happens. So the truth is, if anyone wants to know the truth, you're being experimented on, your children are being experimented on. Go and look in the South African Constitution. If you're in South Africa, the South African Constitution says you may not be experimented on without your informed consent. No experimentation on human beings without their informed consent. That is against the Constitution. You've got a right to a healthy environment. There's lots of evidence. There are hundreds of studies showing that this radiation affects crops, affects plants of all kinds, affects frogs, affects birds, affects, there's 17 studies showing it affects maize, mealies here in Eswatini. Mealies are what people eat. So I've been trying to show them this damages your crops. And this is all low-level radiation, and it's all been kept quiet. No one is asking if they can do these experiments on you. No one's telling you that these experiments are being done. And the only instruction given to the world scientists is, do not research this. Don't go research around masks. So what I'm trying to say is, you can pick at any little one of these corners, and you will find so much going on. I'll give you one other tiny little example. There's an epidemic of obesity. There's also epidemics of diabetes. Diabetes is one of the biggest things that's hitting South Africa. There is a study that shows that people living near cell phone masts show a higher propensity for diabetes. Okay? There are studies showing that this radiation affects glucose metabolism. One of the very, very top researchers at the US National Institute of Health, her name's Nora Volkov. She's one of the most famous researchers in the USA. She did some research and she found that glucose metabolism in the brain, on the side where you're talking on your cell phone, is much, much higher than on the other side of your brain. So something is metabolizing sugar in your brain. Your brain is, something's happening there. This is not supposed to be happening. The brain's not supposed to be metabolizing sugars and glucose. Something is affecting our metabolism, and we're metabolizing glucose. In fact, the whole biochemical chain has been worked out that shows how this is being done. It's affecting our metabolism. Now, this can affect obesity. Every single time I hear somebody tell me a problem, or obesity is a problem, or this is a problem, I shake my head and I say, I hate to tell you this, but if you look, radiation is involved. It can be involved. I regard this cell phone radiation, I'll shut up when I've said this, don't worry. I regard this cell phone radiation as a pervasive cofactor in just about everything that is going on. It is, above all, this radiation is inflammatory. It causes inflammations. And we've got doctors' affidavits. We've got affidavits and doctors' letters from dozens of people who've had terrible skin rashes and so on from this radiation. It inflames the body. Now, you can go and look. Inflammation is now being tracked as one of the main causes of just about all diseases you can think of, from heart disease to cancer and everything, inflammation. And radiation causes this inflammation. So it is so pervasive, acts at so many levels. There are so many syndromes that you can look, and there are many, many factors operating, but this microwave radiation is just one more thing on top. And I believe it can be a tipping factor in many cases. And boom, suddenly you will see 1 or 2% of people with each new technology that's rolled out. You will see, guaranteed. I guarantee you, I absolutely guarantee you, and mark my words, they're rolling out 5G in South Africa. 5G radiation is particularly absorbed by the skin. You are going to see in South Africa and worldwide, I 100% guarantee you, epidemic of skin inflammations and skin rashes and skin problems. That is certain. We're going to see it, and I'll bet you we're already seeing. They're trialing 5G, as far as I know, in the Pretoria area. I've been meaning to warn people in the Pretoria area, watch out for rashes. If your pet starts scratching, it happens to pets as well. They start scratching themselves, and the vets can't find anything wrong with them. You know, so if you find your skin's inflamed, and you rashes and tingling sensations, burning sensations on your skin, that's 5G.
No, you're absolutely correct, and no need to worry or apologize about time here, because the pleasure of the podcast is that we're not as restricted as with live radio. So that's the good news. So, keep sharing. That's very helpful with it, because, by this information being recorded, it's like a wave in physics. It's about, you have a good idea, you need to share it. And, that wave's going to be a tsunami. It's going to just keep on going. It's either going to make a big difference, and it's going to overwhelm people, but it then starts hitting the sparks and things start injecting further.
I think 5G is waking a lot of people up. There are a couple of things that have really woken people up. One is smart meters, because suddenly there's a meter in your home that's pulsing microwaves every few seconds. And there's also issues of surveillance and privacy and so on with these smart meters. So those have created a lot of concerns. And now there's an awful lot of concern about 5G. 5G, if people really understand what 5G is about, you talk about privacy. There's a recording of Tom Wheeler, who was then the chairman of the FCC, the US Federal Communications Commission, talking about what 5G will be able to do. This is radiation. It's very, very dense microwaves. They'll be able to put little microdots, RFID, radio frequency identification microdots, on every single thing that you own. You've got a pair of glasses on. You've got a little screw there. You got a little screw there. They'll put a microdot on there, and they'll put a microdot on there. Every button on your shirt will have a microdot. Every coin in your pocket will have a microdot. Every product in your grocery bag will have a microdot. They can then track these in real time as you move across the landscape. They not only know where you're going, they know where the pen in your pocket is going, because they're tracking that. They know where the cap in the pen in your pocket is going. It's actually astonishing what they're going to do. And they want this across all rural areas. Tom Wheeler was very adamant about this. Rural areas must be blanketed with 5G radiation. This is not just communication. This is surveillance. This is surveillance at a massive level. And I think this is worrying an awful lot of people. And they're quite right to be worried. Again, they'll say, oh, we're going to have driverless cars and it's all going to be hunky-dory. But 5G is kind of like the ultimate platform. It's going to be a platform that enables them to do just about anything you can think of in terms of communication, tracking, surveillance. I haven't really studied it that fully to know. I'm just going on what they themselves say. But they have been saying, this is the industry, for years. We can do all of this. We can track every single thing. They say you've got a truck going down a road. We can track every single component on that truck, as well as everything that's in the truck. It's easy. All we need, quote, is political will. We just need people, politicians and regulators say, yeah, go ahead and do this. And now the FCC has said, go ahead and do it. And the European Union has said, go ahead and do it. And this is being rolled out. So this is now a massive platform. And the truth is, I don't think anyone knows really what its capabilities are, except that it's now frightening a lot of people. So if anyone is listening to this and you're scared about 5G, just from even for surveillance or any kind of perspective, be afraid. It's a very, very scary technology. And I'll tell you something funny. There's a conference. It was the Environmental Health Trust held a conference on 5G, and there were some Israeli researchers. They've been using radiation in the 5G range to radiate people's skin, and they find it's absorbed very strongly by the skin, and especially by the sweat glands. So they can now, and they were saying, we've been doing this for years. We use this radiation, and we can tell exactly when somebody starts sweating. We can actually tell from a distance. They're now installing this kind of technology in airports, so they can tell if someone is perspiring. Now, apart from anything else, this radiation heats you up, and your skin is going to start burning. So of course you're going to start sweating because it's radiating you. But this is surveillance. This is surveillance at absolutely unprecedented level, where they can literally tell, oh, that guy is beginning to perspire now. He wasn't perspiring 2 minutes ago. Maybe he's up to something. Okay, now that technology is in place, and the frequencies it uses are 5G frequencies. The 5G frequencies are almost entirely absorbed by the skin. So what they're doing, this is what happens when you put electrical engineers in charge of health matters. They have now redefined the skin, that is the biggest organ of your body, has been redefined as an extremity. Like your hand is the extremity. You can radiate your hand more than you can radiate your head, because your extremities can be radiated higher levels. Because this radiation is going to be absorbed by the skin, they've got to take special account of the skin. So they've said, okay, we're going to count the skin as an extremity, so it can be irradiated at the levels that we use for extremities. So your face, now, for microwave purposes, is an extremity. Now, this is not an extremity, this is your face. Extremities are your fingers, are things far away. So they're doing everything they can to make sure that they can radiate you at the highest levels, knowing that this radiation is going to be absorbed by the skin. As I say, watch out, you're going to see, guaranteed, skin rashes, skin disorders, skin inflammations. We saw several people completely incapacitated. I sent these photographs of these skin rashes to the World Health Organization. This was from broadband masks. It was actually eye-burst masks. These are broadband, which is a bit like a Wi-Fi. And said, look at these rashes. When these people move away from these masks, the rashes go away. Okay, this is incapacitating them. The one person, she couldn't open her eyes because her eyes were so swollen. When I talk about a skin rash is one of the most debilitating things you can have, especially if it's itchy, your whole body's on fire, you cannot rest, you cannot sleep, you're never comfortable. It's a terrible, terrible thing to suffer. And I'm telling you flatly, lots of people are going to start suffering this soon.
No, that's correct. And I even had a client recently come fly down. Interesting, like you said, from Pretoria, where it's being rolled out. And when that rollout commenced, the person actually started getting these horrible rashes all over his skin. Has been in hospital and seeing doctors left, right, and center. And they said they have no clue what it is, what the issue is, and this person's suffering. So when the person came down, and they then started, having the changes with the environment, different protocols, it started dissipating. So, what you're saying is definitely linking cause and effect here.
Yeah, it's interesting. You say this is in Pretoria?
Correct.
Okay, well, we didn't pre-arrange this, but I said in Pretoria they are trialing 5Gs. You're going to see people with skin rashes, and you're already seeing skin rashes in Pretoria. So anyway, what did I tell you?
No, that's great. Like we're confirming here, none of this has been pre-discussed or pre-recorded. So it's we're working on the fly here. interesting. Like also, like with Nora Volkov, I think she actually got a Nobel Prize regarding her study and work. Which is, and the key thing is, with the stuff you're saying, is that everyone, the kind of stuff it can easily be misinterpreted as, oh, it's conspiracy theory, or it's this, end of the world kind of end of days thing. But the key thing is here, you sharing information, you're a reputable and respectful person. You edit papers and you identify, even in these studies, the patterns of conflict of interest. Darius Zelinsky himself also, goes into it heavily of how science is plagued by this, that, if you're not going to do a study that's going to benefit industry or government's need of this data, like you said, then you lose your job or you don't get funded. And it is a very challenging process. I mentioned the story in my master's where we had a lecture on ethics and ethics approval. Yeah, no, the puppy, yeah, she's playing. She's chasing
very cute puppy. Hello, puppy.
So
hello, puppy. Very cute puppy. Okay, Pebble.
Yeah, she's actually my EMF service dog in training, or service puppy in training.
Well, dogs are very sensitive. There was one story from Natal many, many years ago. A friend of mine was consulted by a vet who couldn't understand. He had 3 Alsatians that died of cancer and couldn't understand why. And this friend of mine went to the house and measured very, very, very high radiation levels everywhere from a nearby microwave mast, except in one spot of the garage where the radiation was quite low. And the guy said, that's exactly where these dogs used to go and lie. But they still got cancer and died. So we're protecting the dogs as well, don't worry. The dogs know, they can feel it. They can also feel. They can feel the radiation. There's no question about it. There were also many cases in one suburb where there were a lot of skin rashes, where people were reporting their dogs scratching themselves furiously, and the vets could find nothing wrong, but these dogs were itching. And people had skin rashes. They said, it's the operator said, it's psychosomatic. You're all hysterical. There were little babies that were getting skin rashes. There were people that got skin rashes who didn't know that there was a mast, and they only found out when the whole of the neighborhood reported this. They said, "Oh, we've also got skin rashes," and they didn't even know that there was a mast. There was no kind of psychological effect. So. And these reports about dogs scratching themselves, I've seen it. And dogs peeing inside the house and behaving very, very strangely, and just behavioral and not just behaving strangely. So dogs are very sensitive. So I'm sure you've got a good sleuth there.
Well, it is challenging sometimes with her training, because she's trained to pick up stuff and the changes in me. And it can be tricky at times, and sort of she's just trained to do it. I mean, picking up where you say dogs can pick it up, we understand their hearing is very good, and that's also part of the link of tinnitus or tinnitus, where people misconfuse that they think microwave is something, but technically it's light. Solar radiation is light, and what happens is the different mechanisms within the ear actually pick up that light. And that is why, when the room goes dark, or you go into bed at night, the ringing sound of the tinnitus is actually at its highest. But because the body's trying to compensate that change in light and mechanism, and it's having this offset effect. Animals pick it up, but I'm sure she picks it up in that regard, but more particularly she picks up the changes in me, and as a result also have her own challenges with it. And what's difficult is that with her training, it's not just me needing to be mindful of the changes in me and how to navigate them. It's having assistance from my wife to help with Pebble's training, because she herself has to be able to distinguish between what's happening to her and what's happening to me, and also have to do these mechanisms. Like I do lots of things to increase my tolerance as best as possible, and I need to do those same things with her, because if she goes off whack, she then becomes a liability to me, as was the case in the past with my previous histories. So these are things that can happen and are difficult. So it's all this continuing process of trying to learn. And that's also why many people experience difficulties with doctors or vets, is that in allopathic medicine, there isn't this focus of training in physics. So a lot of the stuff they learn in medicine school, isn't taught. And, with a lot of the studies, a lot of it comes from persons who have a background in physics, and then they start to go into the biology, and this thing starts to educate doctors. But you also probably found out that the discipline of physics and mathematics is a very difficult discipline to get into and study. It's not always very accepted. There's lots of criticism. And when you're having a doctor that has so much stress, you tell him, look, you need to now learn, Einstein's equations and quantum mechanics and thermodynamics, all these things. He's going, hold on, back off. This is too much for me. And then when it comes to legal arguments, the court might say, okay, we want a letter from your doctor. And then ask doctor, how do you know definitively? And the doctor says, well, now you need to bring a physics expert. Now you need to bring this expert. And it's difficult, like you said, to have all of it in one. It's very, very challenging. But the key thing is, there's evidence of changes. So you want to mention something?
Yeah, no, I'm going to say I regard this as the single biggest failure of Western medicine. It's not dealt with this radiation. They just have left it all to the physicists. They've left it all to the engineers, because it's, as you say, the physics is complicated. The head of the World Health Organization EMF project, this is the project that sets these research guidelines and tells the researchers, don't look at masks, is a woman who is a microwave engineer, Dr. Emily Van Diefender. I've met her. She has no health experience or background whatsoever. She has no background in biology whatsoever. Her entire background before she became the leader, the head of the world's radiation health program, was microwave antenna design. That's all she knows about, is the design of microwave antennas. In other words, the World Health Organization regards this entire health problem as just one of, well, we've got to get the antennas right and get them small enough and get the radiation low enough, and then it'll all be fine. It's an antenna problem. We'll put an antenna design problem, engineer in. Now, my comparison, I actually put this to the World Health Organization. I said, if you had a team of doctors and they were researching the effects of heavy metals on neurology, very common, heavy metals mess up the neurology of human beings. It's a very, very complex subject. You had a team of doctors who were setting up a research program to look at the effect of heavy metals on the nervous system. And then you said to these doctors, okay, now the main exposure that kids get to these heavy metals is from eating lead paint, because they eat lead paint that's peeling off. Okay, so the main thing that gets these heavy metals into kids is paint. So the person we're going to put in charge of your research program is a paint engineer. You doctors are going to research the neurology of heavy metals, but we're going to put a paint engineer in charge, because the way most of this heavy metals gets into people's body is through paint. So it's really a paint problem. It's not a heavy metals problem. That's the same as what they're doing here. They're saying, oh, this radiation is an engineering problem. We don't need medical people. We put an engineer, a microwave engineer who knows about antennas, and she will direct your health program. Doctors would never accept that, except that they do it as radiation. They've been intimidated, or I think, I don't like to talk about conspiracies, because at least I should say, I don't like to talk about conspiracy theories. If you go and look, you can see exactly how the industry conspired to get this technology accepted without any health testing, without any proper comprehensive assessment of what it was going to do. Same thing with 5G, same thing with all of this. They're rolling it out without testing it. And it's due to massive failure on the part of the doctors, because they don't know physics. They think, oh, it's too complicated. We don't know this. Now, I taught medical students at Wits University physics. I used to demonstrate physics practicals to them, because I majored in physics. We had to do it during our undergraduate degrees. And I worked at that. I spent 10 years of my life teaching medical students physics, including radiation exposure guidelines and so on. I know what kind of training they get because I gave it to them. Okay, I know how much they know. It's not very much. But I'll tell you one thing. The radiation experiment we did, and I bet you they're still doing it to this day at the BITS physics department, was with live, what they call ionizing nuclear sources. This is like nuclear radiation, okay? Very weak sources. We put these sources on the benches, we would measure the radiation, we put blocks of lead, and we would measure, and at the end of the experiment, what these students had to do is prove that they had received less than the danger, they'd received a safe dose. In other words, the point of the experiment was to prove that the experiment was safe. And we would go through this whole thing, and I would show them eventually, yes, okay, it's so much, you received so much exposure, so it's safe for you. You received a safe exposure. Then I would say to them, every now and then, if I saw that they were bored, I said, what about me? I've been doing this for 10 years. I do this twice a week. There's a 6-cycle, so you do this experiment for 6 weeks. I do this experiment 12 times a year for 10 years. So I do this experiment 120 times. How safe is it for me? Am I safe? And these medical students would just look at me. This is years ago. And I thought to myself then, if there's any problem with this radiation, these guys are not going to be of any help. It's going to be us. We physicists, we are going to have to look after ourselves because these guys don't know and they're not interested. This is physics. They're not interested in this. This is long before cell. This is back in the 70s when I first started doing this in the 80s. I was teaching medical students. And I remember thinking then, these guys are not paying attention. They're not worried about this. This is somebody else's problem. And I remember thinking it's going to be our problem. And now it most certainly is. And if you try and tell a medical doctor about this, they just look the other way. They don't want to know. They don't want to know because I don't know how exactly they know that they should not investigate this too closely. But they just will not. I tried for years to get one medical doctor in South Africa to stand up and say something. I could not find one. To this day, there are hardly any. There's a handful. Medical doctors just keep quiet. Now, there's something that really makes me suspicious. I have counted at least 12 epidemics, genuine epidemics that have struck South Africa since 1994, including epidemics of lingering flu, epidemics of infertility. You'll find infertility clinics everywhere, epidemics of sleeplessness, epidemics of ADD, okay? I counted 12 of these. Doctors are making a lot of money out of these pandemics. They're making a lot, like, there are headache clinics around Johannesburg. Go and look at the one in Rosebank. There's a headache clinic there. It's right next to a cell phone tower. Cell phone towers are known to cause headaches. Okay? They're making a lot of money out of these illnesses. And they're not looking at the cause. They're not looking at potential causes. Whether that's just convenient for them or not, I don't know. But especially when it comes to things like childhood leukemia, there's a pandemic in South Africa of childhood leukemia. Discovery Health is the biggest health insurer in South Africa. A couple of years ago, said 2 big epidemics that are hitting South Africa: leukemia and testicular cancer. Now, why is there suddenly an epidemic of testicular cancer? Can you think of any reason why men should suddenly be vulnerable to this? What are they putting in their pockets? They're putting microwave transmitters. These microwave transmitters are radiating above the guidelines if they're in your pocket. Okay? Is it any such surprise that we're finding infertility clinics all over the place? We're finding male infertility a problem. Male infertility is one of the first things associated with microwave exposure. Doctors know this, yet they choose to ignore it. And I feel when the history of this is written, it's going to be put down as the without a shadow of doubt, the single greatest failure of public health in the 21st century is to do with microwave radiation, to do with cell phone radiation, Wi-Fi, this whole radiation spectrum. This is the single biggest danger facing us. Far, far bigger than global warming. They talk about global warming as a problem. You're going to see people's skins being burning up now with 5G radiation. What's going to warm you up more in the next 12 months? 5G or global warming? I guarantee you it's 5G. So doctors do not want to know. And when I say this, there's something called the Freiburg Appeal. This is an appeal that was put out over a decade ago against this radiation, and it was signed by at least 2,000 German physicians, German doctors, mostly specializing in environmental medicine. In Europe, they're far more sussed about this. They're far more awake. And as I say, there are at least 2,000 German doctors who have put their names to this petition, saying that we notice this in our patients. We see them when they're removed from microwave fields, their health improves. Okay? So in Africa, in Southern Africa, in South Africa, there's absolute blank denial. The doctors do not want to look. They do not want to know. And whether it's a conspiracy of silence, I don't know, but they certainly keep quiet about it. And it's going to be their great shame, their greatest shame.
Yeah, I mean, to sort of, defend and support the argument of the doctors, I mean, from my interaction with them and consulting with them, the issue is one that they are very, I mean, a GP especially, I mean, they get a very limited time that they can actually spend with a patient, even especially in the hospitals. And, they're working many hours, and to ask them to go further and study or learn something is very difficult. And what happens, I found, is when they decide to come to the party is actually when they reach their own failure in themselves. So it might be severe obesity or diabetes or, a problem with their ligament or like testicular, whatever the issue is. So when it hits home and they trying to take medications or tests and nothing's coming right, then they start to, they encounter biophysics. Now, the thing with biophysics or quantum biology is that it's using the fundamentals of physics to explain biology. Because ordinary biochemistry, it's not something I enjoy to learn, because I find it more of a description of events. So you have these patterns that occur, and you have to memorize all these different words to memorize these patterns. There's no real necessary understanding. But when you're using physics to actually explain those biological processes, then the lights light up, and then there's understanding, and you're able to actually do more of this proof of concept very easily. And and the thing is, the solutions in many regards, and this is why sort of your functional medicine doctors or integrated medicine doctors, like I said, these sleep clinics or fertility clinics pop up. They don't like to endorse or necessarily research these mitigation options or solutions, because it's taking money away from paying off their Mercedes or their BMW. So it's difficult in that. And then even when you do have a doctor that wishes to speak out, they have to first have a very strong transformation and threat on their life or their livelihood before they speak out. Because when they speak out ordinarily and they're not able to physically demonstrate how they've had to change themselves, they are socially attacked by their colleagues and co-workers. As, I mean, you've probably experienced in your line of work, where people would call the doctors a crackhead or crazy conspiracist, or they don't know what they're talking about. But when they start to learn and understand the physics and actually take the time to learn to treat their own problem because their ordinary training isn't working, then they're able to come back and say, okay, this is why it's happening. These are the reasons, and I can show you this is the differences. And it takes that change. And what's key here is that, the problem with non-native NEMF, the issues are non-linear. And, we are trained through, I mean, you mentioned Discovery or the different tech companies and their service providers, that everything comes down to diet and exercise. And, when we learn in physics, it's the complete opposite. And as we're able to learn and understand that, then it's a lot easier to say, okay, these are the changes that need to be made. So it's not just a case of, right, stop the cell phone time, because, the moment one says that kind of word, it's very difficult. But when you say, okay, these are the physics solutions or biophysics solutions to tackling obesity and biophysics. And then later on they go, okay, it's related to non-native EMF. Then there's this sort of eye-opening and, oh, right, I like the solution. I mean, you mentioned with the ICD-11 code of the addiction issue coming up of kids gaming and whatnot. And that comes down like when Nora showed this whole the non-native EMF in terms of the wireless magnetic and the blue light and how it changes the chemicals in the brain. And we come back down to the mitochondria of how the EMFs affect how the mitochondria is able to actually hold oxygen. And in the brain, when you have these depleted levels of oxygen, the glucose or the burning more of sugar to have glucose changes is activated to try and compensate for that. But this effect with the lighting and the gaming, I've done experiments myself and I've seen it with others trying it. By removing the blue light and actually making a red light LED, and you stimulate a different growth hormone, that addiction problem seems to actually fade away. It's sort of one's more easily sort of distracted from it. And the problem with the blue light and the non-native EMF, and this is where it comes to where you mentioned about ADHD, is that it inhibits the mind to think laterally and connect the dots. So when you're affected by the radiation, one is becoming narrow focused. It can only see it one thing at a time. And like you said, teaching you bells and whistles, all these crazy things. And all these clever names are coming up where it's no longer called ADHD medication. It's called a vitamin supplement. And if you're not doing it, then the social currency of your society or the other parents are going to chastise you because your child is not on the latest concentration drug that's going to help them in today's age.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I've been doing a bit of tutoring here in Eswatini. This is rural Swaziland again. And I get told by my students what drugs they've taken for, what, if it's, I think it's Concerta, what's it called?
Concerta, yes.
ADD, Concerta. And they will tell me, okay, I can concentrate for about an hour. Okay, so let's work out because that's how long this drug is going to work for. And they tell me what their Ritalin doses and what their concentration span is and where they are in the kind of in the drug phase. And I'm very grateful for this information. I've never had to teach kids. I don't know how these drugs work. I know that Ritalin, it works very closely in the same way as cocaine. So I know that I've got a kid who's like hyped up and he's like concentrating. This is going to last about an hour. And they warn me, let's work hard now because in an hour I'm not going to be able to concentrate at all. And I'm very grateful to the guidance from these kids. I've never had to deal with this in my life before. This is in Eswatini. This is not in New York anywhere. It's absolutely insane. So I really think that doctors, you say that they don't have the time and they're busy and so on. This is their job. This is their profession. You go to them in faith that they are going and researching and finding out what is going on that could be making you ill. Here you've got a very obvious cause. It's the single most pervasive bit of technology that has ever hit the human race, ever. I often tell this to people. You go and stop people in the street here, even in the bush here in rural Eswatini, okay, in Swaziland, and see what's in their pocket. Most people will have a cell phone. Nearly all of them will have a cell phone. They won't have a ballpoint pen. They will not have a ballpoint pen. They will not have a watch. They won't have anything else. More ubiquitous than pens are these phones. It's the most ubiquitous take-up of technology we've ever seen. They're everywhere. Now, these things are powerful microwave transmitters. You put them against your head. Excuse me. You're radiating your brain with them. You look across the environment. You see these masts everywhere. This is one of the most pervasive things that's ever hit our environment, that's ever affected our lives. How much more obvious could it get? These things radiate. I often tell people, if there's a nuclear power plant down the road from you, every single part of that building is designed to keep the radiation in. It's designed to stop the radiation from getting out. If you see a tiny little cell phone mast, one of these little mini masts, It's designed to radiate outwards. It's designed to impact on the environment. That's its job. It's much more dangerous than a nuclear power plant right now, as it radiates you. So here you've got this pervasive technology. It's on every street corner. It's on everyone's head. You've got everyone's home is now a Wi-Fi zone. As you walk around town, you walk in and out of half a dozen Wi-Fi zones. You're being radiated by satellites. Radiation from everywhere. It's everywhere. The only thing is, it's invisible. We can't see this radiation, so we just say it doesn't exist. But you can see the masts. You can see the phones. You know that there are Wi-Fi routers everywhere.
You can see your body getting fatter.
Yes. You know, there's the terminology here is very strange. There's some wording in the United States 1996 Telecommunications Act. It says the government may not make any intervention about the placement of a wireless utility if that wireless utility is radiating under the FCC limit. In other words, if there's a mast next to your house, if there's a mast right outside your child's bedroom, if that mast is radiating below the FCC guideline, the government can do nothing about it. They will not listen to anything you say about it. That FCC guideline trumps everything in US law, okay? Nothing can be done. If you put a cell phone in your pocket, okay? Now, placement of a wireless utility. A cell phone is a wireless utility. Putting a cell phone in your pocket is placement of a wireless utility. In my interpretation, you're putting a cell phone in your pocket, you're placing a wireless utility. That means men have got some protection from the US government, because they should get some protection, because now you are radiating your testicles higher than the FCC limits. And there's no warning given about this. And there's every evidence that this radiation damages human DNA, damages sperm. Okay? You are damaging the genetics of your entire future line. Okay? But the point I'm trying to say is those doctors should be aware this radiation is over the guidelines. We've all been told these guidelines are safe. Let's assume that that's true. Here is radiation in a gentleman's pocket that is above the guidelines. Wow, shouldn't we maybe pay attention to this? Should we not maybe pay attention when we see a pandemic of testicular cancer in South Africa? No one says a peep. Have you seen one word about this? I see it because I look in the Discovery Health annual report. I look and see what they're saying. If you go and look in the South Africa cancer statistics, they won't tell you. They keep that secret. The South African cancer statistics won't tell you give you a breakdown for testicular cancer. It's kept secret. Okay? We can't find, I've been trying for years to get those figures. So, are there any doctors who are awake out there? Can you think of one doctor who's given a warning to gentlemen, don't put a phone in your pocket in South Africa? I can't think of anyone. Yet they are seeing a pandemic of testicular cancer. I'm sorry. If you're a doctor and you cannot add 1 and 1 and get 2, say, look, men are putting these phones in their pockets. We know. You can go and look in the small print of your own phone. It says, hold that phone 0.36 inches away from your head. Why? Now you might think, 0.36 inches, is that going to make a difference? It makes a huge difference. You know, you talked about the inverse square law. Every millimeter you take this thing away from your head helps. Okay? So if you put the thing in your pocket, you are damaging your genetic material. Somebody should warn men. Doctors should wake up and say, hey, this may be above the guidelines. No one is warning anyone. What is it going to take? What is it going to take? I mean, Mr. Barry Trower has been warning now. You can go and use the word thalidomide and go and Google research. He has warned of thalidomide type deformities now are going to start occurring on a mass scale, especially as the grandchildren of the present generation who are living and working in Wi-Fi environments, as those mothers now get pregnant, their grandchildren, their granddaughters are going to give birth, or their grandchildren are going to be deformed. Do we have to wait that long? Do we have to actually wait and see when we get like thousands of terrible birth deformities? You know, I've been predicting this. Barry Chow has been predicting this. A couple of months ago in the kingdom of Eswatini, a baby was born with no head and no genitals. Never been seen before. This, of course, caused great kind of distress. And a lot of people around here started saying what they always say, oh, this is witchcraft. Okay, I wanted to know, is there a mast near where this mother lived? Was she maybe living near a mast while she was pregnant? What was going on? I don't know. It's just a speculation. But what I'm trying to say is we've been predicting really weird birth deformities. And we, as far as I'm concerned, have already begun to see them here in Eswatini. And this terrifies me. And I don't want doctors saying in 10 years' time, whoops, yes, you're right, we should have seen this. Somebody has to wake these guys up. We're going to have to end fairly soon, but I really feel this is important. And if there's any doctor in South Africa who's speaking up about this, speak up louder, because we're not hearing you. We're not hearing any warnings. We started talking about the Advertising Standards Authority. To this day, I do not know of any warnings given by any other authority, anybody in South Africa. Are you aware of any warnings given by any authorities that there might be some danger?
The only one precedent is the ASA, and in terms of other ones, there's some municipal bylaws that have tried to attempt to give warnings, but there's no other official organs of state. Only now with my thesis being reviewed, I'm getting reviews by organs of state that's confirming that there's this effect and that there's a response issue and risk, and this will take time to filter through. However, the key thing is that's why the point of the show is about SuperDads. We know that tech companies and or governments isn't going to go out there and protect you. And it's about you as a dad to be a super dad to actually protect yourself and your loved ones and your environment. And that's why, I like the example of the ASA is that only by you as, be it a lawyer or a doctor or a member of public or a parent, even the most important is that you as a team member with your wife, it is your duty and responsibility to go out there and create a protection environment for it. And, if you're not understanding, okay, the different mitigation of it, we wanted to cover that about, sort of moving to Swaziland, or I'm sorry, I'm saying Swaziland because I have such trouble pronunciating the official word, but I think we'll cover that in another podcast with having you on board to cover the different strategies that you're coming with Bitcoin mining and the telecommunications array, these other projects. And I would really, really love to have you on board again. I know you're busy, but hopefully we can schedule something with that. But I'd like, sort of cover, because, you being a super dad yourself, give us some, just as an ending, some of your strategies you found are best for implementation that other dads can implement in being a super dad. So the one we know is standing up and protecting your environment, making those complaints, being the advocate, and what are the other practical things?
Okay, I'm not really a super dad. I have a little puppy who's my little baby, but
but you're a teacher.
So
you teach students. That makes you a father.
Yes. Well, I've taken a responsibility for a lot of kids, but I would like to actually address very particularly a message to dads and to parents everywhere. I hate being a scaremonger. I hate warning people. Everyone, cell phones are so useful. They're such convenient things. I hate telling people, oh, these things are dangerous. Every kid wants a cell phone and so on. So what I have told parents, I always try to give them some positive recommendations. If you want a healthy child, don't ever give them a cell phone. Okay, if you want your child to become a victim of crime, give your child a cell phone. I did stories when I was a journalist. The most frequent crime that he was hitting children in Johannesburg was kids being mugged for their cell phones. They were being mugged by other kids at the same school. If you have a cell phone, especially a nice cell phone, you are running a very real danger of being mugged. You are making yourself a target of crime. You are not remotely protecting yourself from crime. Go and look how many headlines. I've had to write these headlines myself as a sub-editor. Killed for his cell phone. Okay, there have been many, many people who have died for a cell phone because a criminal wanted the cell phone. There was a terrible, 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 terrible case in Pretoria. It was over a decade ago, where a grandmother, a mother, and her little child were all murdered because the mother's cell phone rang during the middle of a hijacking. The hijackers panicked, they shot all three of them, and in court, they said what panicked us was we heard this woman's cell phone ringing, and and that's why. Okay, so if you think that a cell phone keeps you safe, think very, 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 very carefully. Okay, so think very, very carefully, especially with children. Do not give your kid a cell phone. Give your kid a landline. Kids love to talk on the phone. They talk about gaming addiction. I would far rather a kid was addicted to gaming if they had a fiber connection at home and were gaming at home than that they were talking on a cell phone doing their homework. Okay? Because that cell phone's going to destroy their brains. Get your kids a landline in their own bedroom. Bribe them. Get them their own landline so that they're talking on the landline. Okay? So that they can talk to their friends and you're not depriving them of anything. Okay? You can tell them, if you are using a cell phone, you're being tracked everywhere you go. Do you want people to track you wherever you go? You know, you would like a bit of privacy. Tell them about privacy. Get them to appreciate that privacy is a very precious thing. And if you as a parent want to track them and know where they are every minute of the day, then you can give them a cell phone and watch where they go. Use reverse psychology, okay? But get your kids off cell phones. Do not have Wi-Fi in your home. If you have Wi-Fi in your home, for heaven's sake, turn it off at night. Do not sleep. Above all, try to keep a radiation-free environment in your bedroom or when you sleep, okay? These things are very, very, very serious. Spend your money on something else other than cell phones. As I say, bribe kids. If you are walk around with a cell phone in your pocket, stop it. Do not put a live cell phone in your pocket. You know, if you've got airplane on your mode on your use it. You know, go flying. You just keep radiation. There are ways. Once you know the dangers, you can do lots of things to protect yourself. Please do it really for the sake of your kids. And if anyone is planning to have children, please try and stay radiation free because this stuff damages sperm. It damages eggs. There's no question about this. And one thing they are now finding, this is a Russian government guideline, the official Russian government guideline, no cell phone use whatsoever by anyone under the age of 18. I've checked this with the head of the Russian government Radiation Protection Bureau. He confirmed this with me himself. No cell phone use by anyone under the age of 18. This is not to say that Russian kids don't use cell phones. Of course they do. But there's a government guideline in place. And the reason is because your hormonal systems, your immune system, your metabolic system has not developed until you're 18 years old. So you are damaging your all these systems. And the Russians also say no use whatsoever by a pregnant woman. Pregnant women, please do not use cell phones. Stay out of microwave fields. There was research that is quoted by Mr. Barry Trower. It was done by Professor John Goldsmith. This is years ago. This is the 1980s. He found a miscarriage rate of over 50% in women who were exposed to microwaves. It was 14% in women who were not exposed. So you've got a 40% increase in miscarriages. This has been found in all kinds of animals, mice. It's disastrous for pregnant women to be exposed to these microwaves. It really, really, really terrifies me. And I do not care if this is scaremongering. I will give these warnings as often as I can. I have often said to the industry, if you think that I'm scaremongering, if you think that what I'm saying is lies, please sue me for defamation. I've said this over and over again in public. And I've gone directly face to face to them, and they have never try to sue me. They know that what I'm saying is true. So if you want to be a super dad, just keep your kids off these phones, keep out of these fields, keep those phones out of your pocket. One day, this will be common knowledge, and I hope that day comes soon. And listen, your thesis sounds very interesting. Good luck with all your work. I really, really hope that it's a long haul to get the authorities to move, but something has to kick them. So good luck.
No, thank you. And that's why I changed. Originally was to focus on epidemiology, my PhD, and other modeling. But now I've switched my interest to biophysics, which is a very steep learning curve. And also I might looking to do a doctorate in law at the same time, based on the previous work.
Yeah, the doctorate in law is probably the one you need. You mentioned Dr. Robert Becker. He was an orthopedic surgeon.
Yes.
He would have definitely won the Nobel Prize for Medicine if he had not started warning about the dangers of the EMFs.
Yes, okay. Yeah, and that's why Andrew Marino continued his work and continued on the work. But Becker, unfortunately, was heavily traumatized by the experience.
Yes, but do you know that he did a law degree?
Yes.
He went and studied law because he saw with power lines and so on that this was going to be a vast legal battle. And so he left medicine and went and studied law. And it took decades before eventually power line radiation got recognized as a possible carcinogen. I actually think that the game has changed somewhat. I had a friend actually who was into EMRs, into the health effects, and she went to study law. And I said to her, I'm not so sure. She is now a qualified advocate, but she has not found it all that much use. I said to her, it's not so much a legal battle now. It's now a media battle. As far as I'm concerned, the scientific issue has been settled. Microwaves are dangerous, and there should be a precautionary warning given to the world. The World Health Organization should give a precautionary warning, at the very, very least. Okay? In the absence of that, it's up to us to protect ourselves. And I've lost my train of thought now, but when it comes to shifting governments, it's a huge, huge fight, and it's going to take far too long. So like consciousness. Oh, sorry, I know what I was going to say now. Yes, I decided that in those days he was probably right. Becker was right to make it a legal battle. I now feel that it's much more a media battle. That the scientific issues are actually resolved. There's no question about it. Low-level microwaves are dangerous. There are 20,000 scientific papers minimum showing damage from low-level microwaves. Now, this is now a media issue. This needs to get into the newspapers. This needs to get out to the public. People need to know the truth. And that's why I became a journalist. And that's why I still work as a journalist. Because I feel, and I still feel very strongly, the real battle is in the media. And it's a real issue because it is generally a requirement for all reporters to carry cell phones. They must carry cell phones. It's part of their job description. You can't work as a reporter these days without a cell phone. So they're such convenient parts of their lives, such essential parts of their lives that they can't really think of their lives without them. So I think there's a bias in reporters not to look at cell phones and health. I've tried with many reporters in South Africa. I've said to them over and over again, you are not going to win a Vodacom Journalism Award for doing this story. But this is very big. No one has taken it up. Whether it's because they are scared of not winning their Vodacom Journalism Awards, I don't know. But it is a fact that I make a fairly strong statement. I've made it often in writing, and no one has really challenged me, that there has not been one single proper investigation in, I say specifically, print journalism, in written. There have been some very good TV documentaries. There have been good TV documentaries in South Africa. There were good TV documentaries in Australia and in Canada. But in print journalism, there's not been one decent investigation into cell phones and health in the English language in any country that I'm aware of. I'm a journalist. I've gone and researched the best article I found, oddly enough. You can go and look it up. It was a few years ago in GQ. GQ magazine had a very good article on the dangers. They went and researched the history. They went and interviewed some of the top researchers like Alan Frey, and they came up with a very scary article. And GQ, all credit to them, to the gentleman, one for us, that they wrote what I feel is the best article to date in the mainstream media. For the rest, there has not been one, even half decent investigation. That's a in America, there's not been one study around masks, not one single study, scientific study. There have been studies in other countries. Iran has done studies, Israel, Egypt, Cyprus has done studies, France, Spain, they've all done studies around masks. In the USA, there has not been one study. That is how obedient American researchers are when they are told, don't go and look around masks, okay? And the journalists pick this up, and they know we mustn't write about it. I don't know how they know. I don't know what exactly the deal is, but these journalists need to wake up, because this is a very serious issue. Now they're talking about addiction. They've noticed they don't notice that this radiation stimulates opioids in the brain. It causes addiction. It causes physical addiction. There's good evidence of this now, So when are these journalists going to wake up? I can say safely that I've lobbied hundreds of journalists all over the world. Not one decent article has appeared anywhere in the English-speaking world on this. That's pretty scary. We've had this technology, this most ubiquitous technology in human history, and not one journalist has done a proper investigation. That is, okay, that's pretty impressive. Something is keeping people from looking at this. It's time we change that.
Karl, thank you once again. I know you said earlier that you're not a dad, but I was recently presenting to the Surgeon General, and it was sort of part of the discussions that, because even though you might not be a dad, the way you are a teacher, the way you're looking out for others and helping them, in African culture, you're still considered a father, a senior that must be respected. And, because, you might not have the correct skin color, but again, we focused on cultural principles, and South African law is about principles. That's why it's different to the American system. And, from SuperDads here, we want to thank you for being a super dad through your work and continued work. And thank you for sharing the time in the show. And I really, really hope that you will be able to make yourself available for future sessions.
Sure thing. Thank you, James. Thanks very much. Good luck with your work, huh?
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
For more, visit www.nicheradio.co.za.